Ceylon Tea Trails is now 10 years old. It's the iconic small luxury resort in Sri Lanka, and that's directly connected to Dilma Tea. Because about 10, 12 years ago, when I saw that the most beautiful part of Sri Lanka was the tea estates, very distinctive, I realized that we've got to bring tourism in, but in a very sustainable manner. So we took 4 colonial estate managers' bungalows built by the British, and we've converted them into luxury lodges where guests can stay. They can walk from one bungalow to another. So we've got 26 rooms in all. So we call it a tea trail because you can actually trek from a bungalow to another. For meals, you can go from Norwood to Castlereagh for lunch, then to Somerville for tea. Although we've got a small number of rooms, I mean, that's exactly the kind of positioning I want, which I think is beneficial to Sri Lanka. So Tea Trails is now 10 years old, and then a year ago we opened probably a benchmark for post-war development of tourism in Sri Lanka, which is Cape Weligama, which is just 39 villas and suites on a 12-acre piece of land designed by a well-known Thai architect. They're both Reliance Chateau resorts. And our whole concept is to create a trail of small luxury resorts which are very unique, which has a sense of terroir to the unique places in Sri Lanka. None of them cookie cutter, none of them branded. They'll all operate as sort of independent luxury resorts. And we're sort of halfway through, and hopefully by end of 17, we will have that definitive small luxury circuit to try and attract the more upscale traveler who now may go to other destinations where they'd pay 2-3 times what they'd pay to come to Sri Lanka. So that really is my mission now, and I spend half my time on that, the other half on Dilma Tea together with my brother Dilhan. We will have 6 small resorts totaling no more than 200 or 250 rooms. The small is beautiful for me, and the moment I'm unable to curate the music or select the bed sheet, so it becomes too corporate, I don't find it interesting. And I think this hiatus you refer to is interesting because we obviously went through 30 years of trauma with the war, but we were in a cocoon. So people who go to Sri Lanka now still find it pristine, the people unspoilt, warm, welcoming, whereas if you go to so many other parts of Southeast Asia, it's just been, a ribbon development of huge concrete monstrosities. So when you come to Sri Lanka, you still see it as it was 20 or 30 years ago. A lot of the resorts are small and boutique-y. We haven't had mass-scale tourism, which I think is fortunate, which is what I think visitors from the UK like, the fact that it's still relatively unspoilt. So my mission in what I do is to keep it that way. I think ultimately where we have an advantage is in Western Europe. Although we did go to the Chinese market, which brings volume, I don't think a Chinese visitor is a repeat visitor and appreciates what we have, whereas visitors from the UK, from Western Europe, France, Germany, Scandinavia, fall in love with the country, come back again and again. So when we basically promote in the UK, you look an average of 4, 5, 6 visits during someone's lifetime. A lot of Brits or people from Western Europe invest in villas, houses, they settle down in Sri Lanka. So I think somewhat belatedly our pivot back to Western Europe and to North America is very timely. Although we've got to look at all markets, I think it's got to be done in balance. And ultimately, Sri Lanka's attractions appeal, I think, to Europeans, whether it's the curry or Brits, whether it's the cricket, whether it's the English, whether it's the beer, and the warm and friendly people. So, I'm glad to see a refocus on Britain. Sri Lanka, Rob, is 6 countries in one. The challenge is not trying to do too much during one trip. Compared to other countries in a fairly small land area, smaller than the size of England, about half, you've got the beautiful tea country where Tea Trails is, you've got the stunning beaches where Cape Weligama is, you've got Yala and other national parks. 10% of our land mass is dedicated towards national parks. Then you've got the stunning East Coast beaches which rival the Maldives. Then you've got the cultural triangle, our version of Angkor Wat with 2,000-year-old ruined cities. So Yala, where Wild Coast Tented Camp is opening end of next year, is a hotspot for leopard. It's got the highest density of leopard anywhere in the world because they're at the top of the food chain. We don't have lions and tigers and so on. So Yala is fairly well known, but in my view, there isn't the sort of high-end accommodation there in keeping with Reliance Chateau and our other properties. So we're opening in Yala, and then we will open in the cultural triangle near Sigiriya. Sigiriya is this amazing 800-meter rock in the middle of nowhere where the king built a palace. And that's the most visited location in Sri Lanka. So we're building there again with Lek Bunag, the Thai architect who did Cape Weligama. That would be at probably the end of 2017. So, that's going to be our circuit. And as I said earlier, we're trying to highlight an amazing experience in a different part of Sri Lanka And you would think that you're in a different country every time you go from one resort to another. You don't have that uniformity that you may have in other parts of Southeast Asia or the Maldives, for example. There's a lot of infrastructure work that was done, not all of it productive, but the Southern Highway, for example, has been a boon. So to get to Weligama, which is near Galle, when we were starting construction, it used to take 6 hours. Now it takes an hour and a half, and from the airport is 2 hours, which is fantastic. The expressway to Kandy work has started. That will take 3 years. That will open up the hill capital and the cultural triangle. So infrastructure development is proceeding, and I think it's now being refocused on what is really productive. But we need to reinvest in health, we need to reinvest in education, because one of the challenges the tourism industry has is a shortage of skilled workers. Of course, a lot of our trained staff are in the Middle East and in the Maldives. So as luxury tourism develops, as we can afford to pay more, we'll find them sort of being enticed back into the country. But infrastructure work is going on. The challenge is, the government is fairly heavily indebted, so how we sort of balance the books. But I think going forward, the improvement in the road network, civil aviation has picked up. Cinnamon Air, which is a domestic airline, which we're supporting as far as we can to connect through a series of seaplane transfers between our resorts. That's a boon. And I think the whole country opens up, because at the end of the day, the longest distance you'd travel would be about 150, 160 kilometers, which now may take 6 hours, which will end up being 2.5. And that obviously will be a boon to tourism. I am extremely optimistic. I am also a little bit nervous that we may grow too fast. We don't want to have 10 million visitors. We'd rather have 2 to 3 million discriminating visitors who'd spend more, because our environment is still fairly pristine. As I said earlier, you've got various other countries who had this ribbon development of masses of concrete hotels. We haven't had that so far, because we are still fairly protective of the environment, and it isn't easy to get these licenses to build. So I hope that were to continue, so that we become more along the Bhutan model, where people pay slightly more per night, but you get a smaller number. But I am very optimistic, because it's one of the safest places in the world. Now the conflict that we had is well and truly behind us. We've got a very warm and friendly people who are welcoming of people from all over the world. And it's people feel at home in Sri Lanka. So I would like to sort of tell those people who haven't tried Sri Lanka, who are skeptical in one way or the other, come and try it. And now with resorts like our own, Tea Trails and Cape Elegam and so on, you do get the more upscale resorts that we haven't had in the country. So I'd welcome each and every one of you to try Sri Lanka.